Welcome to Live Life on Purpose with Jose and Jeff Feliciano from Feliciano Financial Group. In this podcast, brothers and certified financial planner professionals, Jose and Jeff, explain that money is just a tool to achieve the things you want in life, a tool to make the decision to live life on purpose. They draw from years of experience to demonstrate that when your money aligns with your goals, you can live a purposeful life. Because when your vision is clear, your decision is easy.
Hello and welcome to Live Life on Purpose with Jose and Jeff Feliciano. Gentlemen, how have you been?
Fantastic. How are you today?
I'm doing outstanding. Jeff, how are you?
Hey, unbelievable. Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm excited to get into today's podcast. On the last podcast, we talked about we're kind of getting back to some basics and really going through what next steps look like. Because due to the previous podcast, we had a bunch of information. You're going to want to go back and listen to it. We have a plan. We understand the core principles for creating a successful and pleasurable investment experience. We talked about tax buckets for tax efficiency. And I know that on this last podcast, we talked about saving and investing, and we really touched on a lot of risks. But the funny thing is, after we got off the podcast, after we were done recording, audience, Jose immediately brought up, you know what, there's another risk I didn't even think about, and that was longevity risk, right, Jose?
Yeah, no doubt about it. You know, we were touching on market risk, and of course, you've got inflation risk and how long is your money going to last. But I think, longevity risk is something that really a lot of people worry about. And what I mean by that is, we're living longer than we've ever. The mortality age for men, I think, is now at 88, 89 years old, and
wow.
Women are now 90, 91. So in the back of everybody's mind is, how long is my money going to last? And what I love about planning the most for me personally is sometimes people hold back from traveling and doing the things they really want to do because of the fear that's in their head. Am I going to need this money, or is that going to affect my, nursing home, long-term care, assisted living facility, home health care? How am I going to pay for that? And I think that's something why planning is so important in investing versus savings and making that money last the longest and making sure that your withdrawals from your portfolio is tax efficient because you want that money to last the longest. And then, of course, when you're there, there's just something about that peace of mind to be able to travel and you don't have to worry about those things, and it doesn't hold you back. And I just think that living too long is another risk factor that we have to either insure against or just making sure that we are really planning ahead to where you can have those expenses covered.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one thing about real quick, I'm touching on that is you got 2.5 to odds that you will need some type of assisted living facility, adult daycare, home health care, or nursing home. So knowing that, and as we get older, I think it's something that we all think about.
Yeah, and those are expensive. I mean, I think anybody reading the news lately knows that those are expensive propositions. So that's definitely something.
We'll do a podcast on that later on down the road. So we'll focus on what we want to talk about.
Let me add a couple of things. I know last we did talk about risk, and most of that focus was stock market, equities, volatility. But there is interest rate risk. There is inflation risk, purchasing power of a dollar. Like Jose said, longevity risk, and how do we address healthcare? And with those numbers being 1 in every 2.5 people over 65 will need some sort of care. I think it's more of a question that we just have to incorporate into our planning. Hey, what if inflation's 4%? What if interest rates go through the roof in order to curb inflation? What if we need some sort of care? And that's kind of that part of how easy it is to get lost when we're just looking at investments or just looking at taxes when it's tax time or just insurance when it's insurance time, but kind of organizing and simplifying all of those what ifs of the world and just making sure that we're using the right assumptions and factoring in all of those variables.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of that, obviously, for most of us and most of our listeners, that's quite a few years in the future. Obviously, you start planning for it now. That's what you guys are talking about. But there are some things that we're going to cover today that are kind of here and now, which I think the audience needs to hear. And my first question for you guys is about 401ks, really. I think most people, well, I'm sure everybody on this podcast that's listening to it knows what a 401k is, whether they have one or not. But what if somebody has lost their job? This happened a lot in 2020. There's a lot of people that got laid off, or maybe somebody's retired or they've changed jobs. what needs to happen with their 401k? What are their options?
We see it more and more these days. It seems like over the last handful of years, more people are changing jobs, changing careers. Rarely do you see the individual that's worked for somewhere for 40 years with a pension plan and a 401k. It just seems like things are happening for one reason or another. Whether they retired, changed jobs, got laid off. But, at the end of the day, there's options in that 401k because part of that's your money. If there was a match or some form of profit sharing, usually that's your money. So what do you do? I think there's, one, you can leave it there. Which some people do. Number two, if you go to work for a new company that has a 401k with the new rules, you can roll it to the new 401k and continue to participate, continue to get the match. Or three, which you see most people do, is they roll it to their own individual retirement account. So in the individual retirement account, sometimes you just have more flexibility and control in what funds you use, what investment strategies you implement. Because in the IRA, it's yours. It's an individual retirement account.
Going to say is that some people, they had with a 401k with Vanguard or 401k with Fidelity, and they really like those funds, and they don't want to convert to an IRA, thinking that they would get away from those funds. But most people don't realize that you can have Vanguard and Fidelity and whoever, a lot more selection. You have more choices inside an IRA than you do a 401k. So you're not just limited to what the employer provides. You have a world of investments to choose from.
All right. Now, Jeff, you mentioned you can leave it there. One of the options is to leave it with your old company. How does that work? Do you have any control over it at that point when you leave it there?
Well, it's funny. I see it all the time. People just life gets busy. And, there's times that, we go from one job to another. We're raising kids. We're trying to, do everything we can just to get by. And sometimes it seems overwhelming. I see quite a few times people have 2 or 3 401ks that they just never address. They haven't looked at it since they worked for company X. They don't know what it's in. They can't remember what it's in. They haven't looked at it, made any changes. So we see it all the time. And I think it's really just a time factor of calling time out. Let's get organized. Let's get all the statements. What are we doing for retirement? Let's take a look at the holdings. Let's take a look at the investment strategies. And, how do we best organize and just simplify it so that way we can make better decisions with money.
And I would add real quick, one of the common mistakes that we find too is when you have 3 or 4 401ks out there and you did get remarried and you've got the old spouse as a beneficiary is on your old 401k. So it is good to get to check up on your 401ks because I've had situations where a spouse would pass away. This was after the fact, but there's horror stories that people say, I can't believe that all my assets went to my ex-wife instead of my current wife. So yeah, it's good to review a plan.
Yeah, that's that. I don't know anybody who'd be happy about that scenario, to be honest, except for the ex,
and life
of course.
Insurance policies too, so you got to watch it. It's all both.
I was saying that.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
All right. Well, the next question I've got is really about like ETFs and index funds. I think a lot of people have seen a bunch of that in the news. I think ETFs have really grown in popularity, I guess is what I would say, over the last 5 to 10 years. Is that something anybody should consider, or are there just kind of specific people that should be looking into those?
Let me answer that in a little broader of a context. I think the preferred investments of choice that you tend to see in 401ks, company retirement plans, as well as, individual retirement plans. Of course, you can invest in individual stock. It's up to you to pick and choose. And there's a lot of risk involved with just one stock. Whereas mutual funds, you have a professional money manager, whether it's Vanguard, Fidelity, American Funds, T. Rowe Price, that has a team of analysts that take that money and instead of investing in one stock, they invest in hundreds and hundreds of stocks. So you're able to get a level of diversification that you couldn't do if it was just me and you picking stock. So that mutual fund is more of an active money manager. So you got a team they're deciding on what to buy and what to sell actively throughout the year. Whereas an index fund, they're designed to really just invest in a specific list of securities. So let's just say the S&P 500 biggest stocks. That's what they mirror. They own, that's what you own. So that index funds just owns, based on market capitalization, just all of those stocks. Or the Russell 2000, which is small cap stocks. So there's not a bunch of buying and selling. You're just mirroring the index. Okay.
Okay.
And then you hear a lot of exchange traded funds, which are kind of like index funds, except mutual funds and index funds. When you do go to buy or sell, you can't buy or sell those during the day. So when you put your order in to buy or sell, it'll just close at the end of the business day. Whereas exchange traded funds, you can trade them like stocks, so you can actually buy in or sell out during the day.
Oh, I had no idea. Huh.
Yeah.
So
they're all good. I think they all fit in portfolios. I think it's good to have a little bit of active and passive money managers. You know, you just want to get in the boat, and if you're fishing at the right part of the lake, you're catching fish, and also having some activeness in it of being able to move in and out of trends, in and out of favorable sectors, and having the money managers of the world having the ability to buy and sell stocks throughout the year as well.
And if you'll notice, Jeff always emphasizes, simplify and organize. And that's so important because a lot of times when you do have different 401ks out there, people don't realize that sometimes they have 3 different mutual fund companies, but they're overlapping in the same sector. So people are taking more risk than they need to. And we talked about volatility in the last podcast. But, it is very important to organize, and it does simplify a portfolio. Then you can get the proper different asset allocation and be well diversified and have it work together instead of working on top of each other.
Yeah, Jose, I'm glad you brought up mutual funds because we know, and you mentioned a couple names earlier. There's Vanguard and Fidelity and American funds and all that. What are you guys looking for when it comes to selecting the right kind of mutual funds that or suggesting them to your clients?
I think you'd be surprised that if you Googled how many mutual funds are there, there's over 8,000 mutual funds to pick and choose from.
Wow.
If you look at family of funds, there's several hundred. But what we try to find is, we try to find good quality money managers with good long-term track records. You'll see a lot of funds that do well last year or for a few years, but we're looking for more of a consistency. So we try to look at the, not just the 1 and the 3 years, but the 5 years, the 10 years, the 15 years, the 20 years. But what we want is just look good, steady, long-term track records. We look at the fees, make sure they're reasonable. We look at the management teams just to make sure that they've got good cohesiveness and longevity within the same teams. And then it's really what we look for. We just look for consistency. We look for quality. We look for, how much risk do they take in order to get the returns that they get. And we would rather have consistency than we would, one big years here or there.
And I would add, I like to use the baseball analogy. It's my favorite sport. And, it's kind of like the Texas Rangers. I mean, you've got a great professional team and they're good at every position. But what you find is that fund families, they got all-stars at different positions. So you might have Fidelity on first and Vanguard on second and T. Rowe Price at short. So in other words, you can pick the best of class instead of being limited to a fund family. And what you find is, fund families just don't have the all-stars on every position. But you do have the highest probability and you've got a good professional team.
Yeah, Jose, I agree with you. I agree with you on that front. Same thing with the NFL. I mean, if I could put Pat Mahomes and Tom Brady on my team, why wouldn't I? And for the kind of year Aaron Rodgers had, if I could put him on my team and carry 3 quarterbacks, why wouldn't I? So I think that's the flexibility and control and being able to add good quality money managers to your portfolio or your team is very, very important, especially over time, because, different money managers will outperform or underperform when you look at certain time frames. But what you're looking for over time is we're just trying to build wealth on a consistent basis or really just build it over over time. So selecting money managers is important with those factors. Also creating a little bit more of a diligent due diligence process in how you're locating and monitoring those money managers. And if they don't perform for a couple of consecutive quarters, do you put them on a watch list? Do you put them on probation? But what criteria are you implementing in when to change one money manager over another? And I think that is critically important over time as well.
Yeah, Jeff, I will say that in learning from you and understanding where your heart is for your clients and the work that you do, I think you make fantastic choices. I've never questioned that until now. You didn't include Russell Wilson on your list at all. I'm a little disappointed.
Well, let me tell you why.
Hey, don't tell me why.
No, here's why. Is because, the Dallas Cowboys is one of the potential landing spots per his request. So if I keep him under the radar by not bringing up his name, then there's a potential that we may have him here in Dallas.
Let's not talk about that. You don't want me openly weeping on your podcast. It doesn't make for a very good podcast.
Okay,
makes sense. All right, guys, we're getting close to the end of this podcast, but the big question is coming up, and what I really want you to do is give your best advice to the listener. Right. First of all, listeners, choose Russell Wilson every time. Secondly, okay, that besides that, what is your best investing advice, and what should people be cautious about, or how, what mistakes should they be avoiding? So let's talk about a good list that we can give the audience so they can start making some good decisions and have some good questions when they come to you to talk to you about this.
You're always going to hear CFP always say it depends. So It depends what we're saving for. It depends on the time horizon. It depends on your income tax bracket. And what are you going to be withdrawing when you do retire? There's so many factors that there's never two plans that are alike. And with changing tax laws and evolving investment products and rapidly, you just got, things are changing so fast that it depends. But Jeff, if you want to give it a shot, go ahead.
Yeah, if you put it in perspective or just think about all the decisions that we have to make with money, there's everything from investments, retirement plans, taxes, wills, trusts, insurance. It's easy to get lost and get unorganized. So if I could just encourage you to, best piece of advice that I have is just to organize and simplify the process. So that way we can do a few things. Number one, you got to be realistic. Sometimes you have to set goals that are tangible and able to achieve. So realistic. You got to create a plan and follow it. Stay clear of trouble and trusting others blindly. We always say, do your homework. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Yeah.
So avoid fairy tales. Be careful of chasing past performance. So just because a mutual fund or investment did good last year, don't think that's the norm, and that is to project future performance. I see that a lot. Never, ever, ever borrow money to invest.
Oh, yeah.
Stay diversified. Don't try to beat the markets, and most importantly, just avoid your own emotions. We all make decisions based on fear and greed, and usually it's the wrong one. So if you can do those things, you can't help but be successful.
And I would add, just get a second opinion. The worst thing that can happen is you're in great shape. Yeah. So I think getting a different set of eyes on your plan, I think, is very important. And I think you'll start sharpening the saw, which is you, and you'll know the questions to ask. And I think you've got to, your sixth sense, your intuitiveness will tell you which way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I mentioned on the last podcast that one thing that I've personally been working on is avoiding those emotions, right? And getting that second opinion falls right in line with that, in my opinion, Jose, because I need somebody to take a look at it because my eyes, I may have rose-colored glasses on, right? And make a bad decision based on my own emotion. And then I between now and the next podcast, I'm just going to suggest that Jeff works on be careful of past performance, because last season doesn't mean anything for this season for football. I'm just saying, it's all over the place in this podcast. I apologize, but doggone it, you really got me with that. So, all right, guys, this was fantastic. Great list people need to be paying attention to. A lot of great ideas. I also know that you provide a ton of resources to our listening audience. So I'm going to ask you is there a resource that you can give out? And also, of course, your contact information for anybody who wants to reach out to you and your team.
Yeah, so if you go to our website, www.felicianofinancial.com, you'll see a library of resources. There's a piece called Pursuing a Better Investment Experience. It's probably the best piece to start out with to get a foundation of what we're talking about today. And you can reach us at 903-533-8585, or if you're outside of Texas, toll free 1-800-436-1213.
Fantastic, guys. Thank you so much for your time today, Jeff and Jose. This is fantastic information. And I love the football talk, too. I mean, that's kind of fun.
And I don't know if we added in www.felicianofinancial.com, but that's another way of getting a hold of the article that Jeff, or the pieces Jeff is talking about.
Good point. Yeah, absolutely. So visit the website, grab those resources. They've got a ton of them on there. Again, guys, thank you so much for your time today. And of course, our last thank you goes to you, the listening audience. Thank you for tuning in and listening to the Live Life on Purpose podcast with Jose and Jeff Feliciano. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when the guys come out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family. Again, thanks for listening today. For everyone at Feliciano Financial, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live life on purpose.
Thank you for listening to Live Life on Purpose with Jose and Jeff Feliciano. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Feliciano Financial Group. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.